I'm sure that you guys have talked about the community model in terms of marketing for a long, many years. Well, now that wave is finally slapping the face of every single person who's planning an event and going, it is so hard for you to have to recreate your audience, recreate the event app, and recreate all this content every single once a year for your event. Why don't you just keep them on one platform all year long and instead trickle in your webinars, trickle in your podcasts all throughout, and build a community within a privately owned platform that you then control?
The world changed in 2020. Events shifted from in-person to online, and sometimes a hybrid version between the two. Now, as we start to emerge and potentially have more in-person experiences, it's wise to consider just how events can be even more impactful moving forward. Will Curran, the founder of Endless Events, a comprehensive event management company, talks about how the disruptions we experienced and our responses to maintain connection despite them taught valuable lessons that we can use to create deeper communities between people. Let's get into it. Before we dive into this conversation, I wanted to say thank you to our partners at Salesforce. We bring marketing and engagement together. Learn more at salesforce.com/marketing. Now let's get into it. But let's start to at the beginning of this for you. Is like when did the magic of events start kind of spark in Will's world?
Yeah, I mean, the start for me was actually, I think, like even just attending events. Like I remember, being excited, hanging around the DJ at my sister's wedding, and I was just really excited, I think, to be at events and kind of figure out how they all worked. And what's interesting is my background, like I'm more comfortable producing the events usually than attending them. So like when things are going wrong or someone needs to jump in, like that's my like hero moment that makes me really excited. And yeah, like the kind of formal journey started when I was DJing basically in my bedroom in high school, and then eventually my friends started asking me to DJ their backyard parties, and then from there basically my high school told all the middle schools about me. I'm DJing all the time, and then I got to college and I was DJing college events all the time, and then discovered Google AdWords and was like, oh my gosh, I can literally get, a gig for $1 click. Those were the days. Basically just kind of just scaled up from there. But for me, I've always had this incessant need to grow and do bigger events and, help accomplish, bigger and bigger gatherings of people. So, from there, obviously DJing wasn't enough. So we moved into production and focusing on like the technologies of the events, the audiovisual, the lighting, and that worked really well. And I kind of found a niche in being able to help demystify an area that people were kind of like very like IT-like, where it's kind of like a mystery. And from there, basically realizing that, oh, hey, it's not just the production, and before I knew it, everybody was asking me, hey, like, how can I make my events more strategic? How can I make, generate a better ROI? How do I create audience engagement? And realizing that, production wasn't the only thing that we were really good at. And it was, every aspect of the event. So that's really why Endless has, become an event management company, is like in roots of like entertainment, production, and complicated mess and stress. And then moving into this full scale, we can manage every aspect of your event. So in that way, you don't have to kind of mentality.
Wow. Yeah. Because you went through this kind of aha moment around production and technology, and then you started going down this road. I mean, you started applying it to all these events, you leveraging technology, and here you are, was like 15 years plus later, years later.
15 years later. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so it's incredible. I also love is it the Einsteins is that what you call the people that work at Endless Events? Is the Einstein of events?
Yeah, of course, that's the Einsteins of events.
Einsteins. Yeah. Okay. So there's definitely kind of this mad scientist, I feel like you have too, to this. Like, how do we take this experience and holistically, like the tech, the experience, the programming, like the set and setting, like the entire picture, and let's get really good at all of these things. And that seems to have taken you on some wild rides.
Yeah, exactly. And kind of what's been kind of cool for us is that like I've always been like super techie, so like always trying to put a technology spin on things too. For example, like we were one of the first people to be like, abolish the binder that the event planner carries around with him. Like, why do you need to have a physical paper binder for everything? Like, we're completely paperless. Like, it seems kind of like, common now, but like, 8 years ago, we decided to go remote when, literally I would talk to clients. They'd be like, oh, you don't have an office? Oh, I'm sorry. You're not like legit enough for us. Like, and it was really interesting. We've always just said like, technology is the future and we can do things better. There's no reason why we have to fly out to your office to have a meeting when Zoom exists. And so, yeah, like always focusing on how can we do things better through a lens of technology has also been a big focus for us.
So when it comes to events, let's just get right into the nitty gritty. When it comes to events, this is a world that you know very well and your team knows very well. How are brands and individual companies like getting this wrong today in 2022?
Well, I think one of the first things that's happening immediately in 2022 is that people are treating their events like they did in 2019. Right. So, we're seeing a lot of people when 2020 happened, everyone was forced to go virtual and they're like, we have to go virtual. We have no choice. We literally physically can't meet. And then what ended up happening is that everyone like got exposed to this whole world of virtual platforms and, the idea of doing, really awesome video production virtually. And then, we were like, wow, this is exciting. Now this is all going to translate and everyone's going to move, bring this along with them into the future. And then what happened is the second that, mandates went away and all these things like that, everyone's like, okay, well, we can bring everybody back. We're like, okay, great. We're going to move into this future of hybrid events, which hybrid events have existed for many years. The idea of bringing an in-person audience and a virtual audience together under one single event. But then what ended up happening is people are like, oh, we don't want to do virtual. We're just going to do it in person. And I think it's really sad because it's lost a ton of opportunity. It's first assuming that your audience and the people attending your event are the same people that they were in 2019. We know that's not true. Everybody has changed dramatically over the last 2 years, right? I was on a plane like every day, every like minute, all the time moving around. I like hardly ever get on airplanes anymore now, right? So, it's that, but also too, like we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion of events, like that's like when you're going virtual, that is the ultimate way that you can allow yourself to be a truly diverse event. Allow people from any walk of life to be able to come and attend your event, whether they have a large budget, small budget, where they physically are able to, or let's say they're an introvert, right? And they can't attend your event. And I think that us deciding to go back to 2019 and doing it exactly the same way is just such a shame. And it's like taking everything that all the hardship and all the pain and all the, things that we learned from the, pandemic and basically like kind of tossing out the window, which I think is really sad.
So what, because I saw that, first of all, you guys put a lot of content out around events, which I love. I mean, there's a lot of thought leadership there. I mean, it didn't take me long from your Twitter to the company's Twitter to all the different pieces of content. I downloaded this cool report on that you guys did on, it was on HubSpot. Really, it was very well done. It was your report on the 2022 endless guide, endless events to
the trends guide. Yeah.
The trends guide. Yeah. And so you're putting out a lot of content on this, and you talked about the types of hybrid events. I think there's like a couple of events. So the hybrid events is not going away. Are you seeing an evolution of the hybrid event? I know there's different types you mentioned, but is there kind of like another thing happening now that we're merging these two things together in some ways, but maybe better now than before, but is there something else being birthed now that you have more commonplace hybrid events happening?
Oh, 100%. Well, I mean, prior to the pandemic, I call it like hybrid 1.0. It was like to be a hybrid event. What everyone did is they stuck a camera in the back of the room and they just live streamed the event, right? Mm-hmm. And that was a decent experience at the time, right? But now people are wanting, broadcast television quality, broadcast. Now they've experienced that when all the production budgets and money went into virtual events, everyone got to experience how you could do this in the right way. Where I think the future of like hybrid is that it's the ability for you to feel the same level of experience and have almost like a equal experience between virtual and in person. And I'll explain what that means, because I think one of the big challenges everyone thinks is like trying to recreate the in-person experience virtually. I don't think that you necessarily need to do that, but I do think that what you want to try to do is minimize FOMO from the virtual audience. And I think, we're talking from a marketing podcast right now. So like thinking about, creating a virtual element, as a marketing segment of, your event, a lot of people are like, well, no, I want the virtual people to become in person. And it's like, no, you don't have to worry about that. If you make the virtual experience so good, people will then say, well, dang, if this is the virtual experience, I gotta go to the in-person experience of the event. And they'll just naturally go. In fact, many reports have happened over the years, and this is pre-pandemic. Everyone would worry, oh, if I do a virtual element, am I cannibalizing my in-person audience? And that is 100% not true, and not true in any sort of way. In fact, they found in every single report that if you did a virtual element of your event, you actually sold more in-person tickets. And I think that's 100% true. So the idea of like bringing the experiences together and making them similar to each other, I think that the way that you do that is by really intentionally designing your event and working with, your event management partners and your production partners and all those things like that to be able to think creatively about how you can do these things. For example, finding ways to create unique experiences where in-person attendees can network with virtual attendees, making sure that you're hiring the right kind of speakers who can really engage with the camera and look at the camera lens and engage with the virtual audience. I can look down at a chat and be like, Jeremy, I see you in the chat right now, virtually tuning in from, Australia. I love you, man. And then people go, whoa. Oh my gosh, I'm paying attention. I'm engaged. And that's a big challenge I think that a lot of people have when it comes to these, virtual aspects of events or even events in general. Number one topic is audience engagement. And I think that you can really do it if you think smart about it and you don't just tack on a technology or an app. You can do some really incredible things. But I'm starting to go, I think, down a little bit of a rabbit hole in that one.
That's awesome. I was curious about kind of how you mentioned that one example, just how can in-person and virtual attendees connect, and maybe there's some tech or a strategy you're seeing work really well for increasing engagement between someone who's not at the event and someone who is at the event, or what are you seeing work well there?
Yeah, I think, if you're trying to create a way to engage the two, I think I talked a little bit about content, right? Like, and we're talking to a bunch of marketers right now who are listening to this. So you guys get content. It's like, oh my gosh, we have to make amazing content. And we've gotten that for years. We have podcasts, we have great blog posts, ebooks, webinars, all those things like that. Content is king, even in the event space. So my first recommendation is get rid of all the crappy content. Like, just get rid of it, right? Like, everyone's sitting here like, well, how can I get the CFO to create an amazing engagement? Well, does the CFO even really need to talk? Let's be honest. If someone's coming up and giving this presentation, like, if it's not an engaging person with it, the audience is going to fall asleep and be bored. And, part of me starts to like see this trend that like, it's less about the actual content, right? Like, no one walks away from a Will Curran presentation and is like, Will said this mind-blowing idea. If I said a mind-blowing idea, by the way, on this podcast, like, sweet, awesome. Thank you so much. Feel free to tweet me. But, most of the time people are going, wow, like, I knew all these things. But what I do is I try to connect the dots and deliver it through an energetic formula that gets people excited and energized around it. And I think that we need to do that more when we're designing our content for our events, because far too often we're saying, oh, this person's a thought leader, blah, blah, but we never vet their presentation abilities and things like that. And if you're going to do a hybrid event, you have to have great presentation abilities, because it's not as easy as go in and make eye contact with all the people, put up a poll and, do Q&A. You have to be able to do that, but with two simultaneous audiences and juggle them both at the same time. You have to be able to read a teleprompter. You have to be able to have, the chat at the bottom edge of the stage that's flying by, and then you have to be able to read names and read comments. You have to be able to flow the Q&A, and you have to be really engaging on that aspect, I think, to be able to keep people hooked. Because when it comes to virtual, especially, right? If I'm bored, I'm going to go watch Netflix in my living room, right? And no one will ever know. But if you're in person, it's really hard for you to stand up and walk out. But people's attention spans are getting shorter and shorter and shorter. I'm not going to doubt that in the future that it's going to be commonplace. If the content sucks, people are just literally going to walk right out. But with virtual, it's so commonplace. So that's my first tip, is start with awesome content. My second tip is that you design your technology and your platform is, for example, the platform is the place where you host all the live streams. You have the chat, the polling. Far too often people are sticking the virtual audience on a separate platform than they are their in-person attendees. You have to put them on the same platform. And the reason that's important is that you need the ability for them to collide and bump shoulders with each other. And especially with these event technologies now, the event technologies and platforms are designing it so then that way they can handle hybrid events. They can do virtual and they can do in person. And I think that's really exciting too for the future, because in the future, and this me again going down a rabbit hole, is that the future is that this platform is going to become your single app for all of your events. And, I'm sure that you guys have talked about the community model in terms of marketing for a long, many years. Well, now that wave is finally slapping the face of every single person who's planning an event and going, it is so hard for you to have to recreate your audience, recreate the event app, and recreate all this content every single once a year for your event. Why don't you just keep them on one platform all year long and instead trickle in your webinars, trickle in your podcasts all through, and build a community within a privately owned platform that you then control, that you don't have to worry about what's the next Facebook algorithm change, or is Facebook even going to exist in 3 years, because you own the platform, you run it just the same way you own your blog, you own your newsletter, all those things like that.
That's awesome. That we just got back from an event in Cabo actually last week. It was an entrepreneurial group called Baby Bathwater. Familiar with this group?
Oh, cool. No.
It's a really awesome group. But what they've been meeting for years. They get a bunch of entrepreneurs together and they meet at different locations and they travel. But they launched an app in this past year. And so we went to our first event and everything was in the app. The community was in the app. We're getting engaged with each other in the app. The content, the programming, and it was a well done user experience, and it's brilliant. So now every event they have, it's all through this one platform. It's all unified, and we're all over the world. And we fly in to go to these events, and we can now connect all through that place that they own.
That's so
right.
Cool.
So to your point,
do you still use that same app today after the event? Are you still using it to engage?
Yeah, because that's where. Yeah, I mean, for me, the biggest part was the community, the people in the app. So everyone's there. I mean, it's a resource of amazing entrepreneurs and experts, and I can just message them right away, right there. So yeah, it's an interesting way to start building community and engaging that way. How are you measuring success in the event space now today? Have you kind of reprioritized metrics given things have changed? Are you sticking to what you've done in the past? If so, what are the ways you're measuring success of events now?
Yeah, actually, it's pretty similar to the way we did before, right? And obviously, like every event has its own success metrics. For example, like if you're doing like an internal conference, you probably have different metrics than someone doing an external user conference compared to somebody who's doing a marketing activation, that sort of thing. But a lot of it is very, very similar. The difference, though, is that you're also measuring two audiences simultaneously with each other. For example, I think one of the great things about event technology and technology in general is that, before when you were doing an event in person, if you wanted to measure people's eyeballs, were they actually paying attention during that, keynote presentation or whatever it may be, you had to, put eye tracking software in the room and all these things like that. And where, what's cool about virtual is that you have the ability to track everything so minutely, right? Like I went nuts when the whole virtual, revolution started happening, because I was like, as a marketer, I've been using HubSpot for years. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I can track what pages someone goes through. I can see how long they've looked at a live stream, all these things like that. So I think that there's a ton more data that we have because of that virtual aspect. And I think what's happening now is that now people are like, well, I've gotten that virtually. How do I get that in person? And finally, the time is to shine for all these event technologies that have existed for years that do things like RFID tagging or, Bluetooth Low Energy that let you, measure how many people are in a room, that allow you to have people connect their badges just by tapping them to each other. I think there's a lot of exciting things about that. So the technology has just pushed forward the amount of data that you can collect. But I do think that all of it's based in very, very similar metrics, right? We're still measuring things like NPS of attendees. We're still measuring, how many connections are being made. We're still, measuring how often they connect with exhibitors. There's all that stuff still exists, but now it's just like, oh my gosh, it's supercharged by technology even more. And people, they've seen the power virtually and now wanting to implement it in person as well.
How can you talk about event retention in 2022 and some of the things you're noticing, recommendations there?
Yeah. In terms of like attendees and retaining to come back to the events. Oh my gosh, it's hard, right? Like the pandemic basically made it so people became really choosy. Right. Like I said, like I'm on way less planes than I've ever been. I used to speak at, dozens and dozens of conferences. And now, like I'm picking and choosing. I'm picking the one conference I want to go to. I'm picking, the being more nitty gritty about which ones that are actually going to add value. So I think people are very much now saying, I don't need to go to 3 or 4 conferences. This one's doing it really, really well. But I think that is also fueled by the idea that if you are doing a hybrid event, some people are going to say, I went to that conference for the keynotes and the talks. I didn't really go for the networking. I'm just going to sit at home and watch it on my couch, and then I can walk the dog in between, or maybe I can answer some emails in between, and they feel more comfortable with that. But also too, I think there was the death of a lot of events, I think, over the last 2 years, right? Like some people tried to go virtually, did it poorly, and now they're like, oh, yeah, we're going to go back, but their audience is already gone. And I think that the audience being already gone is just given an opportunity for new people to come in to create new types of experiences and kind of gotten rid of some of the old events. But I think it's also challenged event planners, event professionals, marketing professionals to say, how can we do this better? And I love that because like it's so easy in our industry for us to say, oh, hey, let's just do what we did last year and like stamp a new year on it and just, let's shift up the speakers a little bit, but we'll keep it all the same. It just feels like a rehash every single year. And so I think this opportunity for the attendees to be so adamant about a better experience that it's now getting everybody to hopefully rise up. I think we'll see that in like the next year or so is, I think this year, if you can't do a good event, it's going to be like the nail in the coffin, I think.
Do you think, just generally speaking, that people are really wanting to come back together more now than in the past? Do you feel like, are you noticing in all the events that you're a part of, producing and creating and hosting, are you seeing kind of an onslaught of people that are coming back together now?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, people are so like just jazzed about the idea of seeing each other, right? Like, I saw some of my friends over the weekend at a wedding, and hadn't seen them in a little while, and I was just like, oh my gosh, we have to meet in other cases other than just a wedding, right? Like we're just so excited to see each other, and it's given an excuse for people to come back together. I think one of the interesting things when it comes to like everybody coming back together though is that like that only can last for so long though, right? Once people start seeing each other regularly, that's not the only reason why. So I think what we're seeing right now is like a flood of attendees coming to events that are like, I just want to see people. Mm-hmm. And then what's happening is that, once they get enough people, they're gonna be like, well, wait, why do I really need to go to that anymore? Why exactly do I need to be there? So I think that there's this opportunity for you to use it as a draw to get those people initially, but then sustain it by creating an experience more than just meeting people, or meeting people in a way that is so unique that people are just excited about the idea of being in the room together, but more than that. Because if you're just leaning on the idea that it's post-pandemic or towards the end of the pandemic, I should say, right, feelings of wanting to meet each other, that's not sustainable. That's not a sustainable business strategy. It's like the idea of like going on a social network just because everybody's on it. It's like, yeah, you can do that and you'll get lucky because they'll just be eyes and they'll just be there. But at some point, like you need to get more strategic than that.
Is there kind of a sweet spot of events or types of events that you guys are putting on now? Like what's the scope of events that you're working with now?
We're doing primarily corporate events. So we're doing conferences, meetings, and then a lot of like marketing activations and user conferences, right? Where, if it's primarily driven around the idea of content, the idea of networking, right? Conferences, like that style of event is very, very good for us because we find that, it's less targeting the idea of like, trying to get somebody to, oh my gosh, like I have to meet this, XYZ person, a celebrity or whatever it is, or, like just randomly placing on a street corner to get eyeballs on your product, but instead is, designing a meaningful experience that goes beyond just the flash and trash, but beyond that. So like conferences work really well for us, meetings, that sort of thing. And then, yeah, a lot of user group meetings as well.
Do you have any thoughts on events, I guess specific to kind of the B2B world? I know that it seems like oftentimes these B2B buyers are very kind of fragmented. They're anonymous. They're often resistant. And the B2B world is also vast, and there's a lot of events happening in that world. Do you have any thoughts around things that are working well in the B2B world in terms of getting people together, high-level ideas or strategies, or just examples that you've seen work well to get some of these folks in the same space at the same time?
Yeah, well, I could probably talk about the things I've seen work well in the past, but I think it's probably better to talk about what I think is going to be a more long-term solution, because I could give you a trend, but, it might work for the next year or two, but I really think that things are going to change. So, to kind of dive a little bit back down that rabbit hole of community, I do think the community is that future of how you're going to attract B2B people. right? People are wary of social media now, right? Like people really hate Facebook and what's going on. Hopefully no one from Facebook's listening to this right now, and Mark Zuckerberg isn't. But, it's people really are distrustful of Facebook, right? Like I don't want to use it at all. And I give money to put it ads and try to use it. That's how my company literally can make money, is attracting people through the content we promote on Facebook and on these groups. So like the fact that I make money off of it and I don't like it shows, I think, a larger trend. If you talk to those people that have no, feelings for it at all, they're gone, right? And then now that you look outside of Facebook, people are just distrustful of being able to give up their data, right? Like we've been harping on, the data professionals have been harping on this stuff for years, but now it's finally like, oh my gosh, everyone's like, wait, this has been going on? We're like, yeah, this has been going on for like 10 years. Are you ready for this? So people are more distrustful of social media. So I think people are going to be looking for new avenues to connect, but people are always going to be looking for ways to get into a niche community to talk about the things that they love. My girlfriend, for example, loves national parks, and she's like, I don't like Facebook at all, but that's the only place that has a group that I'm able to communicate with people who like national parks. Well, if you offered her up a $10 membership to join an app that allows her to talk to other national park people, she's 100% say yes. And and by the way, you don't give up any of your data, and you pay that $10 a month, funds the cost of it. People will do it in a heartbeat. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's really like, to go off on a little bit of tangent, but like that's really where the Web3 kind of world is starting to come in. Is people are like, I'm cool with being able to have alternative ways to, be able to enjoy these tools I love without giving up my data by, paying for it or, utilizing my computer power, those sort of things. Okay, that's a little tangent for a second. But then coming back to the community model, is that there's also this other bigger trend starting to happen when it comes to B2B, events and things like that, is that all these event technology companies are coming out of the pandemic, and their VC funds are like, yo, you got to make more AAR, annual recurring revenue. You got to be making way more money. You got to be more profitable, because that $20 million you made in the pandemic, now it's going to be 15 because, people are looking for, go back to in-person events, and maybe your market share is going away. How can you draw people back in to get them into this, recurring revenue? They're like, well, what if we just give them the platform for a whole year and they can use it for unlimited events? I'm like, that's a great idea. Now there's more stickiness and they're going to have to use it for everything. And then what happens is the platforms are like, well, that's also a hard ask for someone who has one event a year. So now the platforms are like, we have to become community platforms. So now all these technologies are moving towards community platforms and promoting community. So now you're kind of getting this push-pull that's happening. You have, the technology saying you have to go towards community. You have users who are actually craving that community. And I think finally event professionals are going to listen and be like, oh, community is a great way to do it. So I think to go back to your original question of how do you attract people, when you build a community of people who are interested in a niche and interested in your topic, they're going to be really sticky. And what ends up happening is if you do an annual conference or a monthly event or whatever it is, when they're already committed to the community and like truly committed, engaged, and you just announce that, hey, there's a get together. Now you get to feel that energy of, oh my gosh, I want to meet these people, right? And it doesn't become a hard sell. Whereas right now, so many event professionals and marketers are literally planning events and are like, how do I get butts in seats? How do I sell people to an audience that has no awareness that I exist? Why not create your own audience and then sell your events to those people who are already engaged and love what you do? And what's so great about that is that now you can take that, $500 conference registration, and you can maybe even still sell it for $500, but you're also getting additional revenue in the forms of a $10 a month membership or whatever it may be. And I think that one thing that might pop into people's minds is associations, and associations have existed and basically is this model is like create a community that just happens to have events that go on to it. But the problem with associations is there's a steep joining fee, right? Usually it's like $500 a year or whatever it may be. But also too, the associations get so stuck in an association model rather than an online community model that they're getting left behind because people are paying $500 to join a local chapter where the local chapter doesn't get any of those dues or any of that money, so they can't produce anything of value. And then, most of the time the online platform sucks for these associations, so they end up getting kind of stuck. And then people go, well, I don't want to really pay money just to join a club that I'm still gonna have to pay $500 a year for membership. But online communities totally work, and we see them all over the place, and they're super profitable. And I think it's just the wave of the future of being able to get the attention of B2B buyers.
Are you also hosting events for event companies? Like, I feel like I could see you doing like an event con where like everyone comes to you to learn about what's happening in the space. Are you doing things like that for folks in your
Yeah,
in
a
your
little
world?
bit. Like that's really where our content really shines is like
Yeah.
we try to educate people within the industry. So like we have Event Icons, which was like our first podcast, which was all live streamed and everything like that. In fact, trying to bring event professionals and educate them. And that's worked really, really well for us. And yeah, I'd say there's going to be stuff in the future too of trying to bring more event professionals to talk about these sort of concepts in the future. And yeah, I also speak at a ton of events industry conferences as well, and marketing conferences too. So if anyone needs a marketing speaker, you just let me know.
Nice. What do you think about Metaverse Web3 and kind of the seat at the and events being at that table with those two things? Like, how, are you seeing things happen unfolding there? We're seeing some brands play in the NFT Metaverse world, and Web3 world. What are you seeing in terms of the event world in those areas?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So it's funny. Years and years. There's been a couple people in the events industry have been harping like virtual reality is a big part of the events industry in the future. And we always joke and said, not yet, not yet, not yet. And I thought the pandemic was really going to push VR forward, which I think it did. To Facebook and Meta's, as much as I talk crap about them, the Quest 2 is revolutionizing people's ability to get into VR and utilize that experience. So I think that it's going to take some. I think what's going to happen is something like Apple is going to come out with a headset, or some other major companies can come out with a really good all-in-one Quest 2. It could be honestly the same thing as Quest 2, but just not be Facebook. And it's going to blow up. It's going to be in everybody's household. Everyone's going to utilize it. And I think that's really short. That's maybe next 2-3 years or so. When it comes to Web3, though, I kind of teased it a little bit. I prior to probably maybe a year ago, I kind of was ignoring a lot of the crypto space and things like that. It had a lot of noise in it. And, aside from producing a couple of cryptocurrency kind of like our crypto or, Ethereum based platform conferences for clients. And that was really how I was learning it. I didn't really understand how it was going to be involved. But, more recently, I kind of got involved in the crypto space and tried to learn more about it and teach about it. And I started to see the future of it. Web3 is this idea that it's not a single company that holds all your data. It's the idea of moving beyond this idea of user generated content. It's trying to create like a future where, everything is more transparent and everything's a little bit more open, and that, it's not just based on selling your own personal data. I think that is coming really, really soon. So where I think kind of the future of events is going to start to happen with Web3 is that you'll start to see it mainly in the VR space, right? The idea that virtual component of your event is going to be happening on a VR headset rather than on a computer screen. And I think people are craving that, right? Like we're all zoomed out. We don't want to watch video screens anymore, and on our computer screens at least. We love watching it on our TV though. But if you could say to someone, hey, like you can go in and attend the event in a metaverse component, I think people would be really, really excited about the idea. But what you need is that headset adoption. You need a headset in every single home. You need to make it really easy. I've always talked about it for many years. I'm like, hey, conference attendance sometimes is like, $1,000 to attend for a week. If you said to someone virtually, said like, hey, if you could figure out a way to monetize a virtual component with a headset and send them a headset and say like, they open the box and literally just put the headset on and they're attending the event. I think that's really where the future is, but no one's really, people have tried to do that, have kind of done it, but it hasn't really caught on 100%. I think the next thing will be a part of that will be to talk about true metaverse is that you need that whatever happens virtually or Web3, it needs to connect to that community app, right? Like it needs to be on one single platform. And I think that really is where the future is like the more that you can make it seamlessly integrated with each other, the more that people will get sticky with it, more people will stick with it. But if it's just another app to download, they always end up downloading the app, and then a week after the conference, they delete it. And we want to make sure that we're avoiding that. And instead, we're getting people to stick and keep communicating, keep engaging with us all year long.
That's awesome. Do you have any kind of fun event story, crazy event story that you learned something interesting, or just a fun event that you saw unfold in the past, couple years or even further back if you choose?
Yeah, I've gotten the chance to do some really incredible events, right? Like, so to highlight like one of the craziest, most fun events that we've done was we did like all the Comic-Cons across the country when they were, really at like peak, right? Like when you were like literally every celebrity was at them. So I got to meet like all like, and I'm a kind of comic book nerdy guy. So like I got to meet all like the comic book movie stars and, got to like, meet Stan Lee, for example. That was crazy. So there's been some like really crazy experiences like that I think have really like really opened my mind in terms of like, how do you interact with famous people and things like that. Right. So that's probably one of the craziest ones is the amount of celebrities I met at the Comic-Cons. But, like everybody, I have like the craziest stories of people calling us like a week out from an event and we have to like rehaul everything. We've had it where we've done just, the craziest stuff. But I would say, the coolest thing that has ever happened at an event has probably been, just getting to meet the people who, have influenced you and shaped you as a person. That's pretty cool. And just, being able to say like, thank you to those people to their face, I think is a pretty incredible experience. And then also I'd say another just great experience when it comes to events is when you work for months and months and months and so much planning and detail, especially in some of these like really tight shows where there's like, okay, when the CEO walks, when he takes 3 steps, we need the fireworks to go off here. And then we need the video to go here. Those are pretty incredible experiences when you kind of get to pop it all off. It all starts to happen. It all unfolds. And what you do for months and months and months finally comes together in that moment. Like, that's like wow. Next level. Like there's no feeling, there's no, I'd say there's no drug in the world that can compete with that feeling that you get when that all happens.
Oh, that's awesome. How did you win the Comic-Con business? That's a great account.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So this is like many, many years ago now at this point. So this is like when we were transitioning away from like entertainment and DJing towards production.
Okay.
I was sitting on my friend's couch. And it's while I was still in college too.
I love it. It's a great start. It's a great start. On my friend's couch. That's how we locked in Comic-Con. On my friend's couch.
Okay. We were like, and Will doesn't watch football. Like he's more like a, hey, if you want to watch football, I'm there to hang out with you as a friend. And he's like, hey, we're drinking some beers, hanging out, watching football, just talking. And his dad, we had thrown like house parties in college, like in his parents' backyard. So his dad had always been like, hey, yeah, like, check out, like I've set up screens like this. We do this event where we have some screens, but they're not as big as these ones that you're bringing. Cause I was like bringing like big projection screens, big sound systems for these backyard parties and stuff. And he's like, yeah, they're not as big. And then, so we're sitting on his couch one day and his dad goes, hey, Will, like we're working on a bid for this Comic-Con. I had no idea what Comic-Con was at the time. I'm not going to lie. I think I heard of San Diego Comic-Con, but like, or I don't think he even said Comic-Con. He just said like, we're doing this event. Would you be interested in putting a bid in? Because you guys do production and sound and staging. And I was like, yeah, sure. That sounds really interesting. Love to get, put my name down. He's like, well, what's your email address? Okay, here's my email address. Here's my information. He's like, okay, cool. He'll probably email you tomorrow. And I remember getting the email the next day. And the founder of that Comic-Con, which was like the 3rd or 4th largest Comic-Con in the country at the time, it was like our big start in being able to start producing these. He's like, hey, here's the bid. Here's all the information. And I've just skimmed through the bid. And this time I had a team. So I literally was just like kind of the face of it. So I was like, I skimmed through the bid and I saw a date that it was like, oh, we want to have everything solidified by like, May 28th. And this is like March 28th or something like that. I was like, oh, okay, cool. So yeah, we have until like May 28th to get the bid out. And so so I was like, I replied like, oh yeah, we can totally have everything to you by your May 28th deadline. I sent it off to my team and like just kind of forgot about it. About like 5 minutes later, I get an email back. He's like, oh, I think you read it. The due date of the bid is like March 31st or something like 3 days. And we're like, whoa. Oh my gosh. And so we ended up putting like, I remember like getting on, we gotta go put this all together. And we started like kind of like doing the mental math as we were reading through the scope of work. And we're like, oh my gosh, this is really, really big. This is a big like event for us. And so we started basically putting together the bid and everything like that. And I remember it was like March 31st. It was due at like, 11:59 or whatever it is. It's like 11:50. And I'm, G chatting back and forth. I think this was before we had Slack. And I'm G going back and forth with my head of operations who's building out the proposal. She's like, this is really, really high. Like this is really, really high in budget. Like I think we're going to lose the bid because we're just too high in price. And I was like, okay, well, what can we like discount down to? And I was like, let's make like a 10% margin or something crazy like that. I was like, just, slash the price. And like, at least we will be in the running for next year and we'll learn how to do better or whatever it is. And so we went through like a round of interviews and all these things like that. They checked our references. And, I remember we were at another like a trade show thing. This is like probably the last trade show I ever did because they never really brought us much business, which is why we focused on content. But I remember being, my head of operations gets a call and she's like, it's the Comic-Con people. And she like literally runs off. And then she like gets called, and I was just like, yep, this is when we find out we didn't get it. They're saying thank you, all those things like that. She comes back, she grabs me, and she like pulls me off to the side. She goes, we got it. And I was like, what? And we were like, our whole team was with us at the time. And I was like, okay,
amazing.
we're at the trade show. We got to stay focused. Let's not tell anybody. So then we all went out to dinner afterwards. That's like was a big thing when we had an in-person office back then. And we were all like based in one single city. And now we're like all over the world. But I remember being like, we pulled the team together. And we like at dinner, and we're like, oh, and by the way, we have some news to share about Comic-Con. Like, oh, we didn't get it, right? We're like, no, we got it. And I was like, dinner's on us. We're gonna get whatever you guys want. And it was like such a cool moment, and honestly, that was a very, very pivotal moment for us to like grow as a company. Like we learned so much through that experience.
That sounds like a really great launch pad, or at least some great momentum that carried you guys to a whole nother level. That's amazing, man. Cool. All right. So I want to get into the lightning round, which is kind of some fun questions I have for you. Before we get into that, is there anything else you want to make sure we touch on and cover? Things I kind of wrote down, like lessons learned in the last year, the role of event technology, the biggest event trends, anything like that, or anything else you want to make sure we touch on before we get into lightning round?
Well, I think one of the things is like everything's really rapidly changing, right? Like the whole events world just got like ripped up in the past year. So I think one of the things to keep in mind is that it's all going to change, and it's all constantly changing and updating and improving and all these different ways. So like one of the best recommendations I have too is like, don't just stick with what happened in a year ago, because things are changing so rapidly. I think that we probably have another 3-4 years of rapid innovation before things really settle down to the pace they were pre-pandemic. So just keep that in mind. And I think one of the best things to do is just, stay on top of, industry podcasts like this, stay on top of, lots of different publications, right? Check out Endless's content if you want to too. And, just stay on top of these things because it's rapidly changing so fast. What you did 1 year ago is totally going to be different than what you do the next year as well.
On that note, what do you think is table stakes for a good event now? Like, what are the things that you're like, look, maybe there's 3 or 4 things that you're like, these things you have to have now to have a successful event?
I think first, really amazing content, right? Like if you want to try to do virtual in any way, the content's got to be amazing, right? The second thing I think is that you got to have some sort of, fun, unique experience that just kind of gives people a little bit of a different feeling. I think you have to not be afraid to be a little edgy and a little different, right? Instead of, for example, instead of doing, a networking exhibit hall, for example, HubSpot crushed it. And this concept was like, they're like, we're going to turn into a club. We're going to make all exhibitor booths open. We're going to play loud music. And for most people, they're like, wait, the exhibitors aren't going to be able to hear their clients and blah, blah. It's like, no, like that totally changed it. And I think that every exhibitor at HubSpot's inbound conference would say, yeah, that was like the most worthy, exhibit experience I've ever had. So I think that don't hesitate to be edgy. I think the last thing I think when it comes to it is think about how you're going to take all this energy that happens in 3-4 days or whatever it may be and allow it to last all year long. It could be a community. It could be that you're going to do events once a month, whatever it needs to be, but don't let that high, intense, amazing energy, all of the investment that you make for those 3-4 days for your event just to like dissipate. Because otherwise, like that's really where then people will forget about you. They'll talk about you for a couple days, but you want them talking about you all year long.
That was a great mic drop, man. That was awesome. So that was fantastic. Thank you for that. Will, thank you so much for being here. This was such an incredible conversation, and we're going to get into the lightning round. But before I do that, I just wanted to say thank you. This was an amazing episode. You kicked things off well for us this week, man. Appreciate you.
Thanks so much, Jeremy. It's a pleasure.
Awesome. Okay, let's get into the lightning round. For those of you who don't know, this podcast is brought to you by Salesforce. Discover marketing built on the world's #1 CRM, Salesforce. And when you think about marketing and engagement, think salesforce.com/marketing. We've got Will Curran. Pronounce that right? Will Curran?
Yes, sir.
Will Curran, Endless Events, Chief Einstein, Chief Baller. This man is in all things events. Will, first question, lightning round. Here we go. What are you betting on for the future?
Ooh, I'm betting on the fact that you have to know technology in and out. And if you don't have technology and you're not excited about it and you're not implementing it, you're just going to get left behind.
Great. Wendy's and Chipotle join a growing number of companies exploring the potential of virtual worlds. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but what do you make of this, just generally speaking, like these retail brands getting into the metaverse?
I think that people are looking for more ways to connect and explore beyond the flat 2D page. I think that, social is really a hard space right now. So the more that you can look to create a unique experience that people engage with, the more they'll remember you for years to come.
What impresses you?
Oh, other than you guys?
Great first answer, Will.
I get impressed when I watch a movie. I love movies. So I get impressed when I see an incredible storytelling, visual experience that just is unlike anything I've had before. I just get so excited and just get impressed by all the hard work that everyone puts into that.
Any example of one?
I just saw Everything Everywhere at Once. And it was just like such an incredible, just visceral experience that I go like, how did they shoot that? How did they do that? And then, I just go, wow, like these guys like thought of it. Like they just came up with this. And that's really exciting for me. Almost like you get to transition to another world for 2-3 hours or so for a movie.
Love that. If you had access to a time machine, where and when would you go?
I love the idea of time travel. I'm very much about the Flash. Is like my favorite DC comic superhero, and he like time travels all the time. So there's parts of me that say like going to your personal past is a really bad decision because that's how like kicks off a huge DC comic storyline called Flashpoint. But then I would say I would go to the future, like probably to the point before it became a desolate post-apocalyptic world, and then find out like all the cool technologies that they used and try to bring them back so we have them sooner.
I love that.
I think that would be really, really cool.
That's great. What is success for you?
Success for me is like just being able to work to be very happy, and success and happiness I think are intertwined with each other. But for me, it's about being able to have a work on things that I love doing, and the idea of like exploring and learning and trying new things is a really big part of success for me. And getting to have fun along the way. So if I get to have fun along the way and get to explore and try new things and challenge myself, like that's ultimate success all day long.
Love it. What is your favorite app on your phone?
Oh man, I'm gonna pull out my phone real quick.
Yeah.
Just recently transitioned from Android and PC all the way to all Apple products now.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you. It's actually been pretty incredible, and I feel like I've been missing out for a long period of time. I would say if I had to pick one app, I would say probably Spotify.
Okay.
Like the ability, like my playlists, my music, being able to choose it. Like I have Sonos in my house. So like just being able to have music around me just energizes me and gets me really excited. And now that like podcasts are integrated and into it, the ability for people to find content and enjoy audio experiences is, I'd say that's probably the app that I open the most and utilize the most. But a lot of people have heard of Spotify. So let me try to think of one that like no one's heard of. Okay. So this is probably a cool one that no one has heard of. It's called Hydrate. And it's actually my water bottle. It's an app-controlled
I have this one.
bottle.
I have this water bottle, dude. Yes.
So incredible. It's so good. It tracks like how much water you're drinking. It syncs to Apple Health and reminds you throughout the day. It lights up. It's been honestly one of the coolest products. And I was just reaching out to their CEO and talking to him about it. I'm like, I got to talk to you, man. This product's just incredible.
That's awesome.
Yeah, Hydrate with instead of a Y, it's with an I.
Yep. That's so funny. I saw we had a guest come on the show a couple months back, and she came in the studio and I noticed her water bottle was lighting up. I was like, your water bottle is lighting up. I immediately bought one on Amazon, and I have one now.
So cool.
That's great.
So incredible.
What's a skill you believe everyone should have?
I think the ability to find things online. Like I grew up on the internet and, learned, joined IRC chat rooms at a very early age, probably accelerated my aging very quickly. And, but I think the thing I learned is that if you want to learn anything, if you want to do anything, you can find it online, right? Like, if you want to teach yourself how to do cryptocurrency mining, you can find everything you need online. If you want to learn how to do web design, you can do it online, right? Like anything you want to do is online if you know how to search for the right things. And sometimes I've learned that my skill to like very specifically Google things to find the best product or the best tip or the, how to diagnose an error on a system I've never used before. Like that has just become so handy because it makes it so that way you don't have to rely on other people. You can rely on yourself to get the information that you need.
That's good. In the same vein, if you could effortlessly pick up a skill in an instant, what would it be?
Every time, flying helicopters.
Oh,
I want to learn how to fly a helicopter. That'd be, that's something that is not easily obtained. You can do it online. I'm sure I could watch enough YouTube videos, but like you have to get licensed and all these things like that. Do like hundreds of hours of piloting for safety reasons, rightfully so. So I would be really excited if I could literally just like tomorrow, like, oh, I know how to fly a helicopter, and that'd be really cool.
That's great. Okay, last one. What's one thing you would like to do this year that you've never done before?
It's really hard. I really like try to knock down my bucket list as much as I can. The easy answer would be that I would love to learn how to fly a helicopter. That's on my bucket list. But I would say I would love to learn how to, because we're so involved in communities and I'm so like all about that right now. I want to learn beyond just like events, also like how do you create the perfect community, right? Like I know how to build the perfect event. I want to build the perfect community. And I that's a skill that I'm working really hard on this year. And it just takes time, practice, experimentation, and lots of Googling.
I love that. Awesome. Will, thanks so much for being here. This was great.
Thank you so much, Jeremy.
Thanks again to Salesforce for making this show possible. To learn more, head over to salesforce.com/marketing.